Hey, Duff Gibson with me right now on the Calgary Fitness Podcast. And, you came highly recommended as someone who is just doing great things for fitness literacy, especially in our youth. So thank you so much for taking time to spend on the Calgary Fitness Podcast. Give us a little bit of background. Who are you? Who do you help? Who do you serve?
Well, I am a Calgary firefighter. That's sort of my 9 to 5. Well, it's not, I shouldn't describe it as that because it's shift work, but I am a firefighter by trade, but have always been obsessed with sport. And as a young person, like many young Canadian kids, I wanted to play in the NHL, but I was sort of very struck the first time I watched an Olympics. And so for that has been an obsession of mine. It really hasn't changed, frankly. I'm 54 now and still am glued to the television anytime. Summer, winter, doesn't matter. That's been my passion. And so I rose up through the ranks of various sports, tried many different sports myself, always with the intention of going to the Olympics. So most, like a swimmer, for example, would take up swimming as a young person and get better and better. And at some point think, oh, I have a chance to make an Olympic team. I switched. I say I did 5 different sports, each time thinking, okay, this is the one. I'm going to get really good at this and go to the Olympics and represent Canada. And the 5th one being skeleton, that was the one that actually worked. And I went to 2 Olympics and, had a great time, had really interesting experiences. And then ultimately, to tie it back to Dark Horse, which is the program that my wife and I started 4 years ago now, I competed in 2 Olympics and then coached up to the Sochi Olympics. And after that, I felt as though I was missing my own kids' experiences. So I retired from coaching and I watched my youngest son, who was playing Division II hockey. So I always specify that there are differences. Like if you're in Division 9, the parents tend not to be as crazy or misguided in terms of where their kids are going at some point, because I think that's one of the factors that plays into this. But my son plays division. At the time, he was 8. He played Division 2, and he had a coach who was yelling at another kid on his team, and the kid sort of froze, was standing on the ice, didn't know what to do, and the coach yelled at him, and he just stared at him. So the coach grabbed him by the jersey and yanked him off the ice. And on the drive home, my son, who was 8, said, "Man, my coach takes this way too seriously." And I thought to myself, 2 things. What is it about that environment that is, that a grown-up will behave that way, which is inappropriate, which is obvious to an 8-year-old, but not obvious to the adult? And number 2, my perspective, having just coached at the Sochi Olympics, I thought to myself, how has that eked its way into youth sport when at the Olympic level, we would never have tolerated that? Like we literally would have had someone, never come back. We would tell someone that's not serving any purpose. So please either stop that immediately or never come back. So I thought we have missed the boat with regard to our kids. And a lot in our program, I've recruited a lot of former Olympians or people who have, participated in a number of sports growing up. And the Olympians in particular never have to be told that a kid needs to want to do this. It needs to be fun, because that's what motivates an Olympian. If you want to be, that's what I find to be the most frustrating aspect of youth sport having gone too far. What people call the professionalization of youth sport is presumably it exists that way because we want our kids to be great and we want them to reach the highest level and, potentially, be a professional or get a college scholarship or whatever it is down the road. When, if they don't love it, if they don't want to come back, if they don't want to, do it in the driveway in their spare time or in the basement or with their friends, then all of those other things go away anyway. So it needs to be on a foundation of fun. And so that's how we designed our program. So I'm sorry, that's
I love it.
Long-winded way of answering your first question, but
great way to get into it. But we need to rewind here. Like, I mean, you mentioned your time with the Olympics, but I need to give you the credit that you so deserve. I mean, you're an Olympic gold medalist.
Well, thank you. Yes, as I mentioned, I tried 5 different sports, and in each of those sports, I was, until I found skeleton, I was the jack of all trades, master of none kind of an athlete, which is a reflection of my upbringing, I would say. But it makes me very much aware, very appreciative of circumstance and the fact that we are all suited for some things and not suited for others. And myself and skeleton matched. What my strengths are is what is demanded in the sport of skeleton, and what I'm not good at is not involved. So it took me a while to figure out what that was, but I luckily found that, and then had a wonderful team and a great support system. And so I'm very much aware of the fact that the planets aligned perfectly for that to happen.
I want to know, what were some of the other sports that you did before you found skeleton?
Well, when I'm introducing myself to young people, I say I will give 3 people a chance to guess a sport I've never at least tried before. And I was the ambassador for All Sport one day. So there's at one point in its infancy. So there are a number of sports that I tried, like cricket and fencing, that I tried through that experience, that just like for one day, but there's a bunch of things that I've had the opportunity to try. But I say there are 5 sports that I did thinking, okay, this is it, I'm going to go to the Olympics in. And it was after I graduated from, in high school, it was wrestling. And then rowing in university, I had an uncle who went to the '84 Olympics in rowing. And then from there, when I moved to Calgary, it was speed skating, and then bobsleigh, and then skeleton. So, but there's a lot of things that I've tried and enjoy to this day.
That's awesome. That's so cool to hear. And I think that's important too for a lot of people listening. Like, sometimes you think that, okay, I'm going to put my kid into hockey. They're going to be the next Wayne Gretzky. They're going to be the next Sidney Crosby. But it's important to have a myriad and try different things, right? Because even though, for me, for example, like, I was a hockey referee for years and years, but that doesn't mean I'll get my kid into that or hockey or whatever. Like, you also need to pivot if the opportunity presents itself.
Well, you have what you love to do, and I would argue that's a more important search, right? Because if you find something, if you're a young person and you love hockey, that's potentially something you could still be doing when you're 60 or 70. So from a fitness and a wellness perspective, that's more important than the NHL. But a separate question to that, which is the one I was obsessed with, is what are you suited for? What are you good at? And that's a different question. And we are all, suited for some things and not suited for others. And with the kids in our program, I always use the example of Shaquille O'Neal, the best, in my opinion, the best big man ever to walk onto a basketball court. But now that he's retired, I'm sure he's closer to 400 than 300 pounds. So how many chin-ups do you figure? That's the question I ask the kids. How many chin-ups do you figure that guy can do? I would put my youngest son, when he was 3, against Shaq in his prime, because, he's not suited for that. He would be the laughing stock of the steeplechase or gymnastics, but he's absolutely designed to do one thing. And every one of us can say the same thing. Now, for a lot of what we're suited for, it's a very hidden thing. Like, what is it about the shoulder structure or the elbow structure that allows you to throw a baseball or a javelin better than someone else? Well, those aren't physically obvious things. You have to get out and you have to try them. But that is the reality. But again, what you love to do is probably a more important question. And that still involves getting out and trying different activities.
So, former experience with the Olympics, headed overseas. I mean, you've traveled the world, but I want to know what you're up to now. How do you keep you're a man of service. So thank you so much for your service that you're doing here in the city of Calgary. Let's talk about your experience now as a former athlete and how it relates, or how it could help your current career.
Well, my current career is something that is true. This is true with a lot of the first responder professions out there. Is we have become very aware of the mental health aspects of being a first responder, and certainly with soldiers, you have PTSD, you have mental health issues have become more and more prevalent. And that's something that we take very seriously within the Calgary Fire Department. And how do you handle that? How do you deal with that? Well, exercise is a wonderful way of, there was a book, what was the book called? Spark. And I can't tell you off the top of my head what the name of the author, I apologize. But Spark was a great book because it talked about all the physical manifestations of exercise and all the mental and wellness manifestations of exercise, and how it's, for attention, for depression, for all of these things. It's the equivalent of Ritalin and or antidepressant drugs with no side effects other than you get physically healthier. So for mental wellness, clearly that's a challenge in our profession. I would say more so in for EMS workers, more so for police officers perhaps, but enjoying physical activity, enjoying exercise, enjoying sports. For some people, sport is just a much easier and enjoyable way of getting taking care of your physical wellness, which translates into your mental wellness. So that's something, years ago, I didn't get into it thinking, this will be great for my mental wellness down the road. It was only something that I did for fun. But as when we have the Bell Let's Talk initiative that goes on every year, and you have Clara Hughes talking about it, and so many other broadcasters and athletes and celebrities talking about the challenges that they've had with mental wellness, I feel like I've got all the time in the world for that perspective. Because of my job, I would say that I'm very lucky and that I haven't had great challenges, but I have been close enough that I appreciate that that's a real thing, an important aspect of life and wellness as a whole.
Oh my goodness. We could talk mental health all day long and the benefits from exercise. And I think too, as a first responder as well, sometimes a lot of people take that for granted and they just think, I'm going to be safe because of these heroes, right? These heroes that are working shift work. They are, putting their lives on the line to help other people. So I think that they carry a big burden. First line or frontline responders do carry a big burden. So, having that exercise mixed into your routine, I think is very, very important. I want to talk a little bit about Dark Horse itself. Let's talk about why fitness literacy is needed for children or youth, especially during this time with the pandemic.
Well, when we were at the height of the lockdown, for lack of a better term, when everyone was sent home from school and we were doing that, everyone was staying inside and this sort of thing. I'm hoping, I'm trying not to use the term the new norm because you hear it every day, but I'm hoping the silver lining of all of this is that because there wasn't organized sport, because there wasn't school sport, because everything was shut down, I know we as a family, I hope generally this was the case, but I hope, we as a family, we intentionally went outside and we went to places like Discovery and walked through the forest there because it was getting outdoors and it was doing what we do less and less and less through organized sport and through, the world of YouTube and Snapchat and all this other stuff that's everything is a screen right in front of your face. And, you got an Apple Watch and then an iPad and then the computer and the TV. It's screen time. When, I'm a lot older than you are, but in my generation, it was very simple. It's the sun is shining. You need to go outside. And as a consequence, and I was very lucky because we had in our neighborhood, we had 6 or 8 kids who were all the same, literally the same grade, let alone within a year or two. And so we played street hockey, we played hide and seek and kick the can, and we built skateboard ramps, and raced, bicycles and jumps and went exploring, and that took care of physical literacy. How to make a kid physically literate is a completely different challenge now. But back in the day, you have fundamental movement skills and very bright people who have broken down every aspect of every, throwing, catching, jumping, hopping, all these different aspects. And back in the day, we were kicked out of the house, and that, the fact that we got around on skateboards meant that we all had core strength and balance and stability, and we all played baseball and we all played hockey, and because that's, it wasn't an option to go outside and you take your iPad outside and your parents didn't see, and I'm just going to play a video game for 2 hours. Well, that wasn't an option back then. And all of that's my belief is, and part of how I've tried to structure Dark Horse is to inspire a love of this stuff. And so we'll do different activities, and a lot of what we do I would call challenges. Instead of playing basketball, everybody gets a basketball. And here's your first challenge: dribble 50 times with your left hand without looking at it. Okay, that's challenge number 1. Now, it's obviously it has to be appropriate for the age and the skill level. But now sit down and stand up without stopping dribbling. That sort of thing where your focus is on what you're doing. I don't care that there's another kid who's better than you. You're starting at your level and you're trying to see what you can accomplish. And if you move, it's all set up so that it's easy to move up a level or 2 levels or 3 levels. But if I see that someone has gone home and has tried that in their driveway or in their basement or something like that, and they're a little better next week, to me, that's the home run, because it's becoming something that they just enjoy doing for fun. And because if you can accomplish that, like we were, as kids, we probably would have been exactly like we were exactly like the kids today. If you gave me the choice, I would have laid on the couch and watched TV all Saturday, probably, until I got so bored from doing that, I would have done something else. And our kids would be the same thing. But once we were forced to go out, then we also got in trouble regularly for being late coming in, because we were having, we were into whatever we were doing outside. But that, if you inspire a love of physical activity, then physical literacy takes care of itself. That's my belief.
And I want to take that too. Like, how much does language come into this? Like you mentioned the word challenge instead of exercise or fitness, right? So once you start to incorporate the play or the fun side of it, like how much does that play into it instead of just thinking, okay, let's go do exercising?
I think, see, in various aspects of my life, I have become very much aware that the terminology is important. It's funny, sort of along the same lines, I would say the people you're doing it with, like the instructors that I hire, the best ones are a little bit silly. They're a little bit like the kids themselves, and their attitude is infectious. I think the language is important, but it's just doing it and enjoying it and wanting to do more. Is in its simplest form, that's it. And you're always going to have someone who, down the road is motivated by the fact that, their school had to run around, the soccer field, and I was pretty good at that. And I was almost up at the, you know what I mean? Like, everyone's going to be suited. If you're one of the best kids, that's kind of a motivation. Everyone's suited for some things, not for others. What motivates you? If it's just the social aspect, like it is for so many kids, then we need to make sure that our youth sport programs don't interfere with that benefit and inspiring them to participate. So I think that's a key, and it's how our program was designed. What turns kids off sport? Okay, we don't do that. We're setting it up in a different manner so that we avoid that.
Wow, that's all. Yeah, and let's talk a bit. Like, at the time of this recording, like the weather has just turned a little bit cooler. I mean, we're headed into the winter months. The sun isn't going to be up much longer during the day. Like, how at this point? Mental health is tough, everything like that. So how do you keep the kids motivated, or not even motivated, but how do you keep the kids moving, especially as we head into these winter months?
Well, I am, based partially on how I was raised, I'm not against the go outside aspect. It's you've probably seen on social media this time of year, because we've had our first couple of snowfalls, that you need to embrace winter. And that's something that is still, I'm 54, and that's still, like, for years and years of my life, even when I was a speed skater, that was the time of year that I was busiest as a bobsledder, as a skeleton athlete and coach. That was the time of year where I was really focused on something. And now that I'm not doing that anymore, how do I go through these phases where I'm really into paddleboarding. And so now that the snow has come, I'm thinking, it's going to be so long before I get to go paddleboarding again. Or can we afford a vacation? It's not an option this year, obviously, where we can go somewhere warm, where I can do some swimming and paddleboarding and surfing, maybe. That's sort of the activities that I really enjoy doing. And that's a terrible attitude, because I know that there are people out there who dream of the moment the first snow flies, because they're skiers. And one of my kids is huge into skiing. My other son said, I got to ski more, because I only did it once or twice last year. And I need to follow that advice myself. And so last year I invested in some cross-country skis, and I'm going to make sure that I get myself out and doing that, because I always enjoy it once I start it. But you get in, if I got lots of work that I need to be doing on the computer, and it's easy to put it off, and then suddenly it's 2:00. Well, I can't get out to Canmore now. So you have to make time for what's healthy. And that's true of, whether that's relating to diet or exercise, or, your relationship with your wife, etc. So that's something that I need. That's advice I need to take, let alone for the young people. But for the young people, for us, it's like, you call a friend, get out of the house, let's set up the hockey net in front. We have an unfinished basement. And so that, the kids are getting a little older now, but it's still like a workout area with a ping pong table. And, we have 2 beams downstairs that we've put a slack line in between. So there's different activities that we can do inside if it was -30 or something. But, get out of the house. That's the simplest answer to that question.
How old are your kids?
They're 13 and 16 now.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to make a prediction right here, right now. I'm going to guess that sleds, toboggans, snowshoes, skis, the sales are going to go through the roof this year, especially here in Canada.
Yeah. If golf is okay, I don't know why skiing isn't. I don't know why they shut down the ski slopes last year. I mean, it's a completely unique thing, and how do you handle it? And we need to err on the side of caution. I'm assuming that skiing will resume, with less people on the same chairlift, or however they're gonna do it. But this is an opportunity. Like, bike sales, I guess, have gone through the roof. Certain things have been unbelievably positive from my perspective, in terms of a health and wellness, of society perspective. I assume skiing would be the same. And to your point, snowshoeing, also cross-country skiing, everything else. Fat tire bikes is one I'm trying to invest in at some point.
I will say, with this pandemic, yes, I understand the gyms were closed for a while, like, it was tough, but like you said, like, the sales for bikes have gone up. I've never seen more people. Like, I'm looking out the window of my house right now, and I haven't seen more people walking than I did this year. So I think that is a good thing that's come out of this pandemic, is that people are starting to rediscover the outdoors as well. And here in Canada, man, like, this is just, we have the most beautiful scenery, like, people discovering new hiking trails. I think that is just so incredible. I want to spin this around and just talk about the parents that are listening or watching right now. Kids are pretty impressionable, no matter the age, right? So, like, what are some good habits or tricks that maybe you tell parents to do to help those kids along?
Well, relating specifically, I'm going to I'm not sure if you had intended this in your question, but I see things that could be done better, in my opinion, to do with organized sport. And as I mentioned earlier, you have, my oldest son played level 10 when he played Atom hockey. At the time, I didn't even know it went up to 10. It actually went up to 13. But that's exactly where he deserved to be. And the coaches were great. And it was, hey, let's have some fun and let's learn something. And that's my point, is that at any level, that's all it should ever be. What I've found is that kids get turned off, and this is the research. This part of the argument is undeniable, in my opinion. Why do kids quit sport? They quit because it's too serious. It's too much about wins and losses. It's something that you would do for fun. If the coach is yelling at you, if the parents are disappointed and you're getting the lecture on the way home from the arena or the soccer stadium or the baseball field every time, that takes the fun out of it. So it takes the reason why you would participate out of it. And we all have heard that 70% of kids quit organized sport by age 13. That's a huge number. And for what purpose? What is the purpose of youth sport? I would say it's not, it's not a pipeline to a college scholarship or professional sport or the Olympics. It's about health and wellness. So kids participating and wanting to be there should be the number one priority. So if we understand what turns the kids off sport, then our behaviors as grown-ups and coaches need to be grounded or based in the fact that we need to optimize fun and learning. And learning is part of the fun. Like progressing, that's part of the fun also. So, and I think, the word challenge is really important, because if you make it about the wins and losses too much, then that can take the fun out of it. But if you make it about the challenge, well, here's the reality. Every team is going to win some and lose some. And when I'm conveying that thought to young people, a lot of whom in our program are young hockey players, a lot of the boys have played hockey. I say, okay, who won the Stanley Cup last year? And they'll give me an answer. And I've been doing this for 4 years of the program now. So the answer has changed. Who won the Stanley Cup? Well, it's a different answer over the last 4 years. And I say, okay, the regular season is an 82 game schedule. And every, if it ends in a tie, they go until like they have overtime and then a shootout. So someone wins every game. How many times do you think in an 82 game schedule, considering that the math says an average team will win 41 and lose 41. How many times did you think the Stanley Cup champions last year lost? How many times do you think, if an average team wins 41, loses 41, how many times do you think the best team lost last year? And the answer over the last 5 or 6 years has been, the lowest number is 32 and the highest number is 37. So even the best of the best in the top hockey league in the world loses almost half the time, just slightly less than half the time. So do you think, when Alexander Ovechkin won the Stanley Cup for the first time, do you think during that season, when they lost, do you think he broke his stick and said, I'm quitting, I'm never playing again? No, he tried to learn from it, and he probably loved the challenge. And so losing is a part of it. How do you look at losing? Because if you make it about the challenge, then if you want to get better, you have to face someone who's better, which means if you face someone who's better, you're more likely going to lose. But that's how you get better. If you make the emphasis on who's the winner, then there's a positive outcome or a negative outcome. If you make it about growth, if you make it about learning, if you make it about the challenge, and there's always, whether you lose to the top team or not, there's always something to learn from that, or there's always a positive outcome. Like you went the whole second period without giving up a goal and you scored. So if it was just the second, you know what I mean? Like there's always ways of looking at it where you focus on growth. If you focus on growth, and the greatest, I would add to that, the greatest athletes who have been multiple Olympic medalists that you've watched and covered probably on television before at the Olympic Games, they always have a personal growth attitude. They're not humiliated by failure. How we frame that is really important. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Carol Dweck's work relating to a growth versus a fixed mindset. Are you familiar with those? Kids are familiar with the terms. A growth mindset means if I practice, I get better. If I work on it, I get better and better and better. A fixed mindset relates to talent. If you tell a young kid, okay, you're very talented at this, then what ultimately happens, and that's the conclusion of Carol Dweck, is the main researcher in the world on this topic. If you tell someone they're talented, then they tend to avoid situations in which they might lose, because failure then becomes very personal. If talent is something that you're either born with or you're not, then you're very protective of situations in which you fail, because that's exposing something that you can't change. So we want to foster a growth mindset. A growth mindset is something, the difference between a fixed and growth almost exclusively is just how you look at failure. The greatest athletes in the world, the most successful people, leaders, whatever it is, they have a growth mindset, and that's how you get better and better and better. And ultimately, those are the most successful people. Now, when you're talking about sport, you and I, as parents, we probably don't care. You know, it's not that we aren't excited when our kids do well, but we have an appreciation for what the purpose is. It's health and wellness. Okay, so ultimately, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't excited when my kids do well. I want them to do well, but I have an appreciation for the ultimate purpose. The ultimate purpose is to enjoy it. So the great irony of it, and the reason I tie it back to high performance sport, is that kids get turned off it because as adults sometimes we put the mindset of a high performance athlete, or what we think the mindset of a high performance athlete, which is win, 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 when the foundation of sport for fun and the foundation of high performance is the same foundation. It's fun. You have to enjoy it. You have to practice, get a little better, and say, oh, okay, I put a little work in, I get a little better. That's motivating. That's fun. So that's, well, in very simple terms, advice for parents, which was 10 minutes ago what your original question was there. I apologize, very long-winded on this one. Advice for parents is, I love to watch you play. I don't care if it's so exciting when you score a goal, but I love to watch you hustle out there. You didn't score any goals today, but you hustled, and it was so awesome to see you into it and loving it and just trying, and you're getting better. That's the I love to watch you play philosophy. Something very practical that my wife and I do is we cheer for both sides. We cheer for great plays, a great defensive play, a great stop by a goalie, a goal for their team and for our team. We cheer for that because it's along the same lines as I love to watch you play. I admire effort. I admire it when you do it. I admire it when I see the other team do it, as opposed to this really subtle message that a lot of parents give their kids, which is, I'm really happy and excited when you do well, and I'm down and not as happy when you or your team loses. Well, that's not why we're here. So remember why we're here.
The thing I like to say too is there is no failure, there's only feedback. And I love that you kind of put a nice bow on that. And I love to hear that you cheer for both sides. As myself personally, a hockey referee for 17 years, I can't tell you how many parents, how many coaches, how many timekeepers have gotten in my face, right? And it's it's sad to see, but it's the reality of it.
Yeah. I don't know if you know the name Cal Botterill.
No.
Sports psychologist. Son Jason played in the NHL and was the general manager of Buffalo. Daughter Jennifer won a few gold medals for Canada in hockey.
Okay.
But Cal has this reputation in the athletic world. He's a sports psychologist. So in the Olympic world, and in the world of professional sports, he is very highly thought of. And he says it pretty flatly, and I'm not, this isn't a word for word quote, but he says a lot of the problem is parents who are trying to live through their kids to make up for their own lack of success or experiences at a high level of sport themselves. And I don't want to make that generalization, and it's important to acknowledge the fact that you have great, wonderful, wonderful coaches who are volunteers, and the whole system grinds to a halt if you don't have volunteer coaches. It's just sort of a few bad apples, a case of a few bad apples. I don't want to be disrespectful to the my kids have had some absolutely wonderful coaches, but they've also had a few parents who have played professional hockey. And those 3 times I can think of between both my kids, for all the levels they've played going up, on 3 different occasions, my kids have had a coach who was a former professional hockey player. And those guys never raised their voices to kid referees, never got upset by a penalty, never celebrated more than the kid did. You know what I mean? Like they had, and my way of interpreting that is they understand where their motivation came from. It was a love of the game. It wasn't because some grown-up was yelling at them and correcting them and telling them what they were doing wrong and yelling at a kid referee and this sort of thing. That's nobody's motivation who sticks around with it. A kid who sticks with it, whether it's ultimately to play at a higher level, or if it's the kid who sticks with it and still enjoys it at 60 or 70, it's because of a love of the game. And so what we do as parents need to foster a love of the game. It's as simple as that. Or not interfere with a love of the game, put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Having said all that, and speaking about failure, what is your biggest failure?
That's a very open-ended question. In the context of sport?
Let's take sport and personal.
My greatest failure. Well, I think I was not my greatest failure. Oh, I feel like I've got medium failures everywhere, but great failures. I don't know. I don't think I was a great coach because if I thought you were behaving like a child, it was very difficult for me to pretend that wasn't the case. I watch I watch coaches now in the NHL, for example, and I think, I'd be if someone's acting like a baby or faking a trip or whatever, I couldn't pretend that wouldn't rub me the wrong way. So I don't know. This is not answering your question. This is going to end up being edited out because I don't have a great, here's my lame attempt at a good answer to this question. I have failed so many times on a small scale. I've prevented the major catastrophes in my life. Is that
I actually, no, I love that. That is, I think that it's such a good answer to, like, because a lot of people, they'll take that traumatizing experience and shut the door, right? And it's like, they recognize these small failures as catastrophic, right? And I think that recognizing that your failures are perhaps stepping stones, right? Maybe, sure, yeah, maybe you're taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but you're still progressing and you're still learning and you're still growing from those quote unquote failures along the way.
Well, from an athletic perspective, at age 10, watching the Montreal Olympics, I thought, okay, I'm going to be an Olympian, and did wrestling for so many years and got pretty good, but failed to make a national team, and then switched to rowing and did pretty good, but failed to make a national team. And then, same with speed skating. I was a provincial champion, but so far away from representing Canada at an Olympics. And then bobsleigh, and then skeleton. They were all failures to the extent that based on what my goal was, and I did not achieve my goal, and I switched sports, but they were all learning grounds. I mean, they were all power sports, with the exception of rowing, I guess. They were all power sports, so they were all learning training methods and learning about myself and what methods. Like I can tell you specific weight room protocols that work really well for me that don't work well for other people that I've tried to train, and vice versa. It has to do with muscle fiber types and various, age, probably 90 different things. I don't need to tell you that. But all of that is a learning process. And I learned so much about myself in speed skating that I then applied to bobsled and to skeleton that all ultimately contributed to my success down the road. So what was your expression? There is no failure, only learning, something along those lines.
Only feedback. Yeah.
Yeah. I win and I learn. That's another one, or a variation of that, right? We didn't win today, we learned today, something along those lines. Yeah, it was. So for me, that was like 20 years of learning.
Which isn't a bad thing. Like you can tell because of the mindset that you're taking right now and the way that you're trying to instill that in our youth, I think it's commendable. And I think I want to acknowledge you for that. I think that's a lot of people where they could take the route of win, lose, nothing. It's that all or nothing mentality when it comes to sport, right? But if you are having the mindset and you're training our youth and now our parents to understand that it's more than just wins and losses, I think that's really important. One thing you did touch on is your time in the gym. I'm really curious, what's your training split look like right now?
Meaning,
what how are you exercising? What are you doing for fitness? How are you keeping fit during this pandemic?
Well, I'm very lucky to have a profession in which there's a gym at my work, and I can train while I am on duty. So I'm also lucky to be at a fire hall that has 3 other people with me who are all keen to exercise every time we're there, at least once. So myself, I spent, a good 20 years being tested on max bench press and max squat and max clean because we competed in power sports. So I don't need to, I'm not implying I'm a bodybuilder or anything, but I don't need mass. I don't need bulk anymore. So I tend to do body weight exercises and cardio. So my, chin-ups, push-ups, crunches, leg curl, because I've often had an imbalance there to make sure, that I'm, my knee is stable because, for speed skating, it's all quad. And then when you sprint, now your hamstrings are behind 8 ball and you have hamstring pulls and that sort of thing. So I'm constantly trying to make sure my hamstrings are strong enough, but I do a little bit every day, not every single day, but every day I'm at work. And so when I'm away from work, I usually do a cardio. If it's the summer or even 2 weeks ago, I would be on the paddleboard once or twice on my days off. So it's a little of everything.
So where do you do the paddleboard here in Calgary?
I go on the river.
Oh, nice.
I have a board. I have an 18-foot carbon fiber ocean paddleboard so that I can, and apparently this is pretty common if you think about how this country was, the fur traders or indigenous populations, they would get around on canoe, right? Through the thickest of forest, the river is the easiest mode of transportation. So you either go with the current or against the current. And because of the training, because of the board that I have, and because a paddleboard is really easy to portage with, so much easier to just pick up and walk along the bank, I start in one spot and I go upstream and then I come back. So I found that to be really, really challenging and really fun because, you have little eddies that where the water curls around, and you take advantage of that and get some speed, and then you have to go around the point where the water is going as fast as it can against you, and there are spots where you have to portage, and I really enjoy that. Now it's fun, someone dropping you off at the dam, the Bears Paw Dam, and you just flowing down with the river. That's great too. But yeah, I usually go on the river. I used to go out to Chestermere. That's
okay.
That's nice and close and
on the lake. Yeah,
warm if you fall in, and
yeah.
But
so I tried paddleboarding.
So the best.
Last year, my wife and I, we had our anniversary and we ended up going to Kelowna. And I was like, I need to try paddleboard. I've never done it before, right? I was like, let me try this. Like, it looks like a lot of fun. I was awful at it, Duff. I don't know if the water was too choppy or if like I need more core strength, but I couldn't stay standing. And it was just, I actually was really, really frustrated with it. But I mean, like we said prior, we can always circle back. There is no failure. There's only feedback, right? I didn't win today. I learned something today. So it's not something that I would give up at this point, but it's definitely a challenge, right?
Well, it's with paddleboard. Did you get a lesson or did you just?
No, it was like rental, just here you go, right? Yeah. So, I mean, there were, go ahead.
Sorry, I would say that I set back my surfing. I'm no expert by any stretch, but the first 3 times I tried surfing, it was like, I think I know what I'm doing. I've been skateboarding since I was a kid, and my life would have been so much easier. I just took one lesson. For someone to just, you dig a little hole in the sand, put the fin in the hole and lie on the beach for a second. You practice jumping up. That's all it would have taken. And my life would have been so much easier. But I would say the same thing with a paddleboard. Now, I'm 210. I know I've heard you say that you're 6'3". I don't know how big you are, but what I find is typically a paddleboard is built for someone who's maybe 150 pounds. So if you're 210, like I am, and you're on a board built for someone who's 150, you submerge it. It becomes much more difficult to balance on it. And so part of it, which I sort of learned the hard way by buying one and going, okay, that wasn't perfect. I'm going to buy one slightly different the next time. I'm now on a board that's perfect for me. But I sort of learned on one that wasn't, and sort of learned the hard way. But people do that all the time, and they're sort of built one way or another. And someone who will rent it to you doesn't necessarily know what makes the most sense. But I have to, as someone who thinks they know everything about skateboarding and snowboarding and this sort of thing, a lesson goes a long way.
A long way. That's awesome. I wanted to, we were chatting even before we got on the podcast, but I checked out your YouTube channel. And one of the things that you mentioned was this quote unquote formative period, or, it's something that the kids remember in their lives, in their, growing up in their youth. Can you talk about this and, how that is really important in developing?
Yeah. Well, again, we've already talked about it to a certain extent in this podcast. It's about a love of the game. And for me as a kid, we were kicked out of the house and we played street hockey for 2 hours every day after school or every day on the weekend. If you read, I've read 2 or 3 biographies of Major League Baseball players or NHL hockey players or various different athletes, and they almost always talk about a time when their parents yelled at them because the streetlights were on and they were still playing baseball in the field at the corner, or they were still playing hockey with their friends and they don't want to come in. There's no external reward for playing street hockey with their friends. There's no trophy, there's no prize. And yet as a kid, I got in trouble regularly for not being home on time. And what were we doing? Having fun. And at the same time that we were having fun, we were developing physical literacy. We were developing, fitness, social skills. We were handling our own problems. We were settling our own disputes without a referee. And all of those, there's a great deal of social, like that's another Cal Botterill thing. There's a tremendous amount of social development that goes on there at the same time. But it's a formative period whereby you develop a love of the game. It's something that you want to do. It's not something that you feel you have to do or someone is making you do. It's I had a conversation recently with a guy named Sean Barry, who has started a company where they're called Three Stones, where they're going to go in and they're going to help evaluate sports organizations and make sure that they're, doing things correctly in terms of their mission statement and so on. And they had contact with a family, and the kid, and this is now becoming a terrible story because I can't remember the family's name, but the daughter was every kid played at least university level hockey. One kid is playing in the NHL. One kid was the former captain of the Calgary Hitmen, and the daughter has a recording career. And their parents' thing was, I'm never going to force you to get out of bed. I'm never going to fight you to get in the car to go to practice. It's, if you want to do it, great. If you don't, I'm not going to make you do it. And they have such a successful family in terms of those extracurriculars. And that's truly a part of it. They've obviously set things up. So I'm not going to make you do it. You have to decide what you want to do. And that was, and I don't know this, but I could almost guarantee that same family kicked them out of the house. They have three sons, and they're all within a year or two. So, you have, a makeshift basketball or street hockey game with just that household only. So I'm sure that was a big part of it. It's such a common thread.
Yeah. This has been a great conversation. We could chat all day about this. And I think a lot of people right now will take a lot of value out of this because we're in a pandemic. Kids are struggling now too, depression, mental health. I think it's really important to highlight the importance of movement, intelligent movement during this time. I think that's really, really crucial. I do want to be respectful of your time, though, and I know that the programs are kind of on hold right now. Can you tell us where people can get more information or they can find out what you're up to?
Yeah, we have a website called darkhorseathletic.ca. And a big component of that website, and in terms of getting kids active or having an understanding of what we do as a program, one of the pages on that website is iloveachallenge.ca. You can, if that's an easier thing to remember, because people always want to put an S at the end of athletics, but iloveachallenge.ca gets you to a page on our website that has a series of videos, and the challenges are from the kids in the program or a few guest Olympians who start with, a volleyball or a soccer ball or a tennis ball or whatever it is. And you start with level 1 and you work your way up. So our website is darkhorseathletic.ca or iloveachallenge.ca. And there are 40 challenge videos. I sent you to that YouTube channel. The iloveachallenge.ca has a link to the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/iloveachallenge. So it's all there. It's for kids. The viewership of those videos has really gone through the roof during the whole COVID pandemic, because I think a lot of teachers are saying, okay, you got to do one challenge. One teacher actually sent us a template that she had made that you can click on that same iloveachallenge.ca, where you can click on that, and it has every challenge listed with all the levels, and she had her class try the challenge, circle what level they got to, and go through all the challenges over the months in the spring. And so I asked her if we could share that template. And so it's tools for teachers and fun challenges for kids, which are just, it sort of ties back to what we were talking about before. Why do kids not want to participate? Well, someone else is really good and I'm not that good. You completely take that out of the picture by having you challenge you. And so every kid starts with level 1. I don't care who the best is in the class. I love to see kids trying and moving to level 2 and then putting some effort in, getting a little better and moving to level 3 or whatever whatever is appropriate for their age and development level. But that's ilovechallenge.ca.
And are you on social? Any social media channels?
Yeah, we have all of my personal things are just Duff Gibson. All of the Dark Horse things are Dark Horse Athletic. So the Facebook page is Dark Horse Athletic. The Instagram is Dark Horse Athletic.
Duff, anything else you want to add while I still have you here?
Well, Justin, I feel like we hit all the main ones. I appreciate your line of questioning, and I appreciate you letting me go off on tangents and hit the important points already, I think. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Okay, Duff, hang on for just 1 second. I'm going to stop the recording.
Awesome.